Welcome to our webinar, Growing Women Leaders in Education. We're honored that you took the time to be here today to discuss what all of us can do to ensure more women can succeed and lead in education. I'm your moderator, Kayla Burrow, and I'm AVID's Marketing and Communications Specialist. Before I introduce our presenters, here's a little housekeeping. We are recording today's broadcast, and a link to the recording along with this slide deck will be emailed to you later this week. All participants are in listen-only mode, but you can communicate with us in the chat box. Be sure to click the chat option in the top right-hand corner of your screen. We'll have at least 10 minutes at the end of today's webinar for Q&A, so please submit your questions in the chat box throughout the presentation, and we'll do our best to answer those at the end. We're joined today by three remarkable women who have shattered the glass ceiling. Sandy Husk, AVID CEO, Kathy Hurley, the co-founder and CEO of Girls Thinking Global, and Nancy Lewin, the Executive Director of ALOS. Now, without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Sandy Husk. Sandy?
Thank you, Kayla, and thank you for the listeners and the participants this afternoon. We're excited that you wanted to join us. I thought I'd start by sharing just a little bit of my history, a little bit about AVID, and then, excuse me, ending my section with some tips, some thoughts about women in leadership positions. I came up through the public education system in a fairly traditional route, came in as a teacher and went from counselor, principal, a couple of central office positions, and then superintendent. I was a superintendent for 18 years in 3 different states, beginning in Colorado and then Tennessee and then Oregon. I'm now the CEO of AVID Center, and I'm absolutely delighted to have this position. It brings me great joy every day to know that we're supporting educators across the nation and in other countries who are working hard to make sure that all kids get opportunities and the support systems and the motivation they need to do well in careers and in college. Part of my path in my professional leadership was really focusing on 3 to 5 year goals, and I'll talk a little bit more about that when I end my 10-minute section. So who we are at AVID, we are a nonprofit organization that's been around for well over 35 years, 37 years. We are in 45 states, and we actually have schools across the nation and internationally. Most of our international work is through the Department of Defense schools. We provide support for educators to use proven solutions around instruction and providing a really caring and engaging environment for them to be sure that kids excel. You'll see that we've trained 70,000 educators, and that's not cumulative. That's about how many educators we reach in a given year. And currently, every single year, about 2 million students are benefiting from what their teachers have learned with AVID. The AVID Effect is what we're really known for. We're known for the way that students who have the opportunity to engage with teachers who understand AVID do much, much better in elementary, middle school, and high school. They get access to courses of rigor that they might not normally have taken. And what we're proudest about is the number of kids then who've been engaged with AVID. They get into great careers, they get into college at much higher rates, and you'll see that our overall rate for college going is much higher than the U.S. rate, and that's pretty amazing if you consider the fact that most of our AVID students in that pool are from lower income and a lot of racial categories that don't always do as well in our school system, mostly African American and Latino. What we're not known for as much, or maybe you do know, but we feel like we haven't told it as much of the story, is what actually happens when students get out into those careers and what happens when they get into college. So our board has had a strong focus on making sure that we monitor AVID students after they leave high school. And you can see the AVID Effect is their persistence in college, which again is beating all averages when you look at the U.S. And as my colleague and wonderful friend, Dr. Lee Vargas, would say, we eliminate the gap for racial minorities and poverty by being sure that kids are being supported in the correct way. A new area that we've been exploring is around our career focus, how we help kids with social emotional learning, and how we help kids learn career skills so that they are persistent and resilient in the work setting, not just in their academics. I decided to include a quote here by Melinda Gates because I thought it really aligned nicely with my pathway that I am pretty goal-oriented and driven, and also feel like that the way you make sure great things happen is you focus on building a fantastic team of support around you that buys into the passion and the energy that you bring to the room. So here's a little bit more personal about what I learned along this 40-year pathway, 36 in traditional public education and then 4 now as the CEO of AVID. I think one of the things that I've recognized is that when you're looking at a career path, it's not just the position you want. You've got to make sure that the position you want aligns nicely with your personality, with what brings you joy, with what brings you energy every day. So for me, I'm a change agent. I really like going to places that have very big challenges in front of them and finding a way to energize people to do things they didn't think maybe that they could do. I also have learned that it's really important to think about what your support systems are. Your support system could be, how's this going to impact your family? How are you going to redivide workload outside of your work career? Your support system definitely should include people who've been in your path before. One of the things I learned early on was to ask for help, but also ask for help when you don't need it. Ask for help just to see what other people would say. You're not only gaining new knowledge, even if you knew the answer you were probably going to pick, but you're cementing relationships that you respect what others have to say. There's some questions that have already come in through the Q&A about how do women handle their image of being powerful and yet being kind and thoughtful? How do you balance it when you're in the minority in the room? Because most of the leadership positions are filled with men. And I would say establishing that network and honoring those that have been before you is a really, really critical part of what you should do. And then the last piece of advice I would add is that you need to think about the role that you're trying to create for yourself. And when you take a position where people aren't used to seeing a female in that position, you have to think more than most about what you want your image to be. That could be the kind of voice you use when you're in the room. How do you carry yourself? I would definitely think about what I would put on before I'd walk into a Chamber of Commerce event versus walking into a principal meeting. And I know some folks might think, well, that's not really fair because men don't have to do that. The reality is that when you're shattering that glass ceiling, as Kayla said, you might be the first time that they've had an image of somebody with your talent and your strength having this role, and you're creating not only an image of why they should accept you, you're creating an image for those that are going to follow you. And I think I'm going to stop there. I've got some other thoughts, but I'll wait till we get to the end when we have some Q&A. And so with that, I'd like to turn this over to a friend and a colleague for many years who we've not had the opportunity to work directly in the same organization, but we've been in the same circles for several, well, probably a couple of decades or more. Kathy, I'm going to turn it over to Kathy early.
Okay, thank you, Sandy. It's always hard when you hear decades. You immediately feel old, but thank you very much. So good afternoon to everybody. I'm thrilled to talk with you today about one of my very favorite subjects, women in leadership, and I'm very happy to be part of this incredible panel. So as you can see from this slide, I've been working in education for over 50 years, first in the classroom, then for publishing companies, and now in the nonprofit sector. Although empowering female leaders has been a passion of mine throughout my career, in many ways I feel like this conversation is really just getting started. Okay, now I'm trying to get the slides. Let's see. Oh no. I'm at the top. Kyla, can you just do the slides?
I sure can. 1 second.
Yeah. Sorry, you have plenty on the slides you can read, so I don't know why it's not moving over or pushing it. Okay. Okay, so while we've certainly made progress since I began teaching in 1967, according to a recent report from the Center for American Progress, the women's leadership gap, we have not come as far as we'd like to. For instance, although women are 50.8% of the population and 44% of the overall S&P workforce, we're only 25% of executive and senior level officials and managers, and we only hold 20% of board seats and only 6% of CEOs. In other words, as the report says, this is a stalled revolution. The delay, though, isn't about whether or not women have the education or skills to be leader. The Leadership Gap report also shows us since 1988, women have outnumbered men on college campuses. In a study I'll share later, you'll see that women rate more positively on 12 of the 16 crucial competencies for inspirational leadership. But this gap isn't about men versus women. I think this issue is about recognizing the value of women as leaders, understanding how we can help each other, and taking the initiative to move ourselves ahead. So before I delve into the work I'm doing with female leaders now, I want to share a bit of my story with you. As I said, I started out in the classroom in 1967 teaching special ed in New Jersey, and at that time almost 69% of teachers in the U.S. were female, as again recorded by the National Center for Education Statistics. Teaching was one of the safe professions, a job that women were encouraged to take. Now, how did I get back? Yep, there it is. Teaching was one of the safe professions, a job that women were encouraged to take. On the other hand, the male-female ratio for school administrators was the opposite. If in 1987, 75% of school principals were male, you can imagine what the number was 20 years earlier. Even in 2016, Ed Week reported that women were 76% of teachers, 52% principals, and less than 25% of superintendents. I give you these stats not to say that this is a numbers game, because they provoke a conundrum. If the majority of educators and people with classroom experience are females, then why are the majority of people overseeing those teachers male? After all, an essential skill for any leader is being able to understand the working environment of your staff. So if you presume that anyone running a school or a district should have a deep knowledge of the classroom, why is there not an equal or greater number of women leading the way? There's one answer that stands out to me. Even though male teachers are rare, those few men who taught were groomed and encouraged to be leaders. In my time, one of the biggest obstacles for any female teacher with aspirations was not lack of leadership aptitude, it was indifference. And I know we're going to talk a little bit about mentoring also. Okay? So 5 years later, when I went from the classroom to the educational publishing sector, I knew I was taking a risk. I was a nervous wreck. I moved from New Jersey to Chicago without a job. My transition wasn't viewed as a logical step in my career ladder, and if I did not have mentors reaching out to me to explain how the business worked and how to get ahead, I had to figure it out, how to be successful on my own and craft my own leadership journey. I realize now in a way that I had some essential assets already at my disposal. To begin with, I had parents, my first mentors. I was the oldest in my family. Everybody instilled confidence in me. I had the oldest of 28 grandchildren. They encouraged me to be a risk taker. So even before I started my career, I was comfortable with making bold decisions. Second, I had my knowledge of the classroom. Recognizing and building on your strengths is key to growth as a leader, and I relied on my ability to understand educators and translate their needs to publishers to demonstrate my true value to the team. I also made sure to establish relationships with the administrators as well as the end users so that I remained connected to customer needs from every vantage point. People who were teachers when I started became principals, became administrators, became commissioners of education. Moreover, I'm an AVID student. I thought that was appropriate. I wanted and needed to learn more about the publishing business, but I couldn't wait for offers of mentorship that might never come. I actively sought out leaders at every level, young, old, men, women, minorities, anybody who was willing to share their expertise with me. As I moved around the educational publishing industry, I also embraced the value of networking. I worked for every type of company, from startups to one of the big 3 classroom providers. I worked for IBM, the Learning Company, I'm not going to name them all, Grolier, Plater Learning, So while the finances and the products changed, the companies were bought and sold, it was the networking that really kept me moving forward. I took advantage of every opportunity to meet people, and not just in business meetings. I went to trade shows, industry conferences, leadership events, seeking out new perspectives and new connections. I didn't limit myself to learning solely about the inner workings of publishing, but expanded my lessons to broader areas like management and community affairs. And most importantly, I didn't treat networking as a one-time thing. I tried to keep in touch with contacts throughout the year, sharing information, and knowing who to go to get information became another advantage for me. I also looked for leadership opportunities outside my work, like taking seats on boards and contributing to industry organizations. I didn't tell people I was a leader. I showed them by being an active participant on board committees, serving on work groups, and even chairing nonprofit boards. So as I moved through different positions, my fellow women in publishing and I not only saw the value in mentors willing to share their insights, but in female mentors who would purposely work with other women to ensure that they were prepared for leadership positions. A colleague of mine, Ellen Biello, many years ago started a group called the Dolls. It was called the Dirty Old Ladies of Software, and we wanted to mentor young ed tech professionals. And today, we have 850 members of that group. And along with Deb DeVries and Pat Walkington, I helped develop the Making It Happen Award to recognize women leading the way to integrate tech in the classroom. And they've had 700 members of that group. So I feel really good about the whole mentoring piece. So all of this leads to my work today. A few years ago, I was a student at the Advanced Leadership Initiative at Harvard, and I heard of a study by Dr. Zenger and Dr. Volkman. So they looked at 16 competencies, and you can take a look at this quickly. I'm happy to send this to you, but these are the 16 skills that all people have, men and women, but women were better at 12 of these. And you can look at what those competencies are. But interesting on the last 4, men and women rated very closely, but women rated slightly lower. The only competency where men were rated more significantly than women was on developed strategic perspective, which is actually one of the most important ones for leadership. So I think when you look at strategic perspective, you couple that with technical and professional expertise, you see that's why there are so many more men CEOs who go to the top of their companies, and there's a lot of research that is what happens. So therefore, women developing these 2 skills is absolutely critical. So getting degrees or taking leadership level courses that help build these skills is essential. We know we have the other 12. There's the 21st century skills. I mean, I heard someone from Google the other day talk about the one thing they hire for is teamwork. And, you know, that and project-based learning are just critical. Okay, for number 6, I just wanted to note, and I have another slide. Okay, I did write a book. That was, my husband was surprised. I finished the book. I actually wrote it with my sister-in-law. And I wanted to talk about the skills that I had been reading about, because I don't think a lot of women realize that they have these terrific skills. So I took featured stories from 24 women leaders representing a cross-section of industries, many of them educators, but all of them had education in the background. Whether they had been a lawyer, whether they had been a cook, whether they had been an artist, they all started with education. And after writing that book, I started Girls Thinking Global, which is a global network of organizations dedicated to the empowerment of adolescent girls and young women worldwide. My co-founders, Deb DeVries, and maybe some of you know, but we wanted to create a collaborative space that we could look at practices, knowledge, and expertise between nonprofits. We saw that there was so much duplication of effort out there, and we did not want to do that. We wanted to help others share, not hoard information that can raise women up around the world, and that's been very exciting. So for my last slide, I just wanted to, after Real Women, Real Leaders was published, I got a call from Inc. magazine, and they wanted to know if I had 7 tips to give someone to get to the top, what would they be? And all I could think of was Stephen, Covey with his leadership tips. So I just had 1 minute to pull myself together to think about these. So I want to share what those 7 tips were. Number 1, never trash talk anybody. You never know who you're going to work for, and you never know who you're going to be working with. And so keep your discussions really professional. Next one is network. That's probably, if you asked anybody what would be my favorite topic, it would be network. I've already said how it helped me in a changing industry, but network while you're on an airplane, when you're just in a hotel at a meeting, just talk to people all the time. It's just amazing what you're going to learn. I could write a whole book on some of the stories about networking. It's been interesting. Always give credit and recognize others. Being a leader is about recognizing the value of others and raising them up. I think all successes deserve acknowledgement. Number 4, err on the side of generosity. I happen to have a CEO, Marjorie Scardino, who's a Pearson, who is incredible. But she used to say, you know, there's so much drama in the workplace. We all make mistakes. You know, handling issues with grace rather than fire will engender loyalty, which is priceless. Developing relationships, I've already talked about that. It doesn't have to be a specific job or company. Go beyond that. Strive to be a leader in your industry, in your community. Surround yourself with smart people. We know the best leaders surround themselves with smart people. And if you can manage to throw in a few people who have humor and humility, that's also going to be great. And then last one, listen, then lead. You don't have to be the loudest person in the room, have the most ideas in the room, but when you're able to listen and reflect on ideas, you're usually in a better position to contribute to your team, and this will make you a better leader. So I hope I didn't go too fast going through these kinds of things. This is what I think makes a good leader, and I know we're going to be answering questions later. So I'm happy to turn this now over to Nancy Lewin, who's got some great tips also.
Hi, everyone. I am truly honored to be with you all today. I'm honored to connect with you and to be part of this panel. Dr. Husk and Kathy Hurley are amazing leaders, and it is a true honor to be part of this panel with them today. And I also thank AVID for providing this opportunity and structure so that more women can hear how women can help each other. A little bit about my background. I do have 23 years in public education. I was first a bilingual teacher, assistant principal, a special education director, a chief academic officer, and now I am truly blessed to be the executive director for the Association of Latino Administrators and Superintendents. And, you know, when you see the word Latino there, it really means for all people of color, for all underrepresented individuals, students, and leaders. And women are underrepresented. So I'm glad that we are all together here today. I know I've listed all these previous jobs that I've had, but one of the most important jobs that I think that we sometimes forget is that of being a mom. So I was a mom. I'm a mom as well. And I was fortunate to be blessed with 2 beautiful children, one that is a consummate extrovert and one who's high-functioning Asperger's. So I learned a lot from them, and I took those skills to the school setting with me every time I interacted with other individuals and parents, family, and community. The numbers, wow, they are amazing. Latinos and Latinas will make up a quarter of the U.S. population by 2025. So we really need to make sure that we are prepared to take on meeting the needs of students and to developing leaders that reflect that demographic. The Latinos and Latinas will make up 1/3 of the U.S. population by 2050. And 17% of Latinos are the ethnic minority, and I guess I could say ethnic minority majority now. So as we see these trends, we know what's coming, and we see the demographics in our classrooms, and we do need to build female leaders to be able to bring their skills and so that they benefit the children in the classrooms. So out of the over 14,000 school districts in public schools K-12, only 4% of the superintendents are people of color. That, to me, is an amazing number, and not in a positive way. I know that you in this audience are amazing leaders. You all have exceptional qualities and skills, and we need your representation in all these leadership roles across this country. So we know that 4% of the superintendents are people of color. Well, less than 2% of the superintendents are Latino, and even fewer are Latinas. So we definitely can do and should do something about it. It was an honor for me to be selected as Executive Director of ALAS, the Association of Latino Administrators and Superintendents, because I feel that we have a moral responsibility to make certain that we are supporting and engaging in networking that is going to be a catalyst to women and to people of color to become leaders. Presently in our ALAS organization, we provide supports, resources to our members. We are in a ripe time for advocacy, and that's one of the things that we do. As a matter of fact, in April, we're going to be having a legislative update, and we will be on Capitol Hill making our voices be heard. And we also share in developing our our future superintendents, because we have a Superintendent's Leadership Academy, and we want to make sure that we're building capacity and preparing these individuals to be leaders of color, but that they can lead all children, not just be leaders in schools where there are children of color. They are going to be prepared to lead all students equally. So our Superintendent's Leadership Academy, we have developed several individuals, some individuals who you might have heard of. One of the individuals from our cohort 1 is Richard Carranza, who is now going to be the chancellor in New York City Schools. Another individual is Susana Cordova, who's deputy superintendent in Denver, Colorado. Guadalupe Guerrero, who is now superintendent in Portland, Oregon. And we have so many others, like Leslie Torres Rodriguez out in Connecticut. We seek to develop individuals that have the passion and the heart to do the hard work and to make sure that they're prepared to help everyone across the school systems, the 14,000 school systems in the United States. We started a new initiative called Linking Latina Leaders. And I guess what I would love to change it to Linking Lady Leaders, because we need to have an abundance mindset. We need to help each other. We need a network. We need to reach out and know that as we support others, it will be given back to us in return. We have over 6,000 members across the country. We're about to complete our 7th SLA cohort, and we have 16 state affiliates. And once you join the ALAS Familia, you join a large network that is a support system that will be able to help you. I know that Kathy had talked about, reaching out to others, asking questions. And when you build a support network like that, you feel the confidence that no matter what comes your way, you're going to be supported and you will have the help that you need in your path during your leadership travel. So what can you do? Well, first of all, we need to honor the legacy of women who came before us. We need to honor women who really took up the challenge and became leaders, who did things first. We need to remain resilient. And, you know, we are strong because sometimes not only are we a school leader, a teacher, whatever role we play, and then we go home and our mom, parent, counselor, nurse, everything else on top of that. So I know women are truly resilient. You need to accept shortcomings as growth opportunities. Don't ever look down on yourself when you find yourself in a struggle or situation, because it's amazing what you learn and what you can change in the future based on just reflecting on that situation. You need to really state out loud what you want to accomplish. What is it that you want to be in 3 years? What is it that where do you want to be in 5 years? And then you look at planning out your trajectory. Set those goals like Dr. Husk said. You know, you need to have those goals and you need to take action and monitor what you're doing to reach those goals. Also, we need to build that solid network to access support. We need to mentor and we need to allow ourselves to be mentored, and that in turn will value and inspire others as well as yourself. This is the time to make your mark. There is no time like the present. I know we've heard of the Me Too movement. We've heard of so many different movements, but I think this is the time where we can take action and make a difference in our own lives by networking and reaching out to other women and knowing that it is okay to reach out. It is okay not to know everything, but know that you're going to have someone out there to be a support system. And I'm going to add that it is a moral imperative for you to prepare for and for you to take your place in leadership roles. It is urgent that we help each other open up paths for one another. And before I let you go, I just want to share a couple of things. There is a wonderful quote that I wanted to share with you. And that quote says this: "There is a special place in heaven for women who help other women." And I think what's even just a little quip right here, this quote was said in I guess in a funny way, an opposite way, which I used at our L3 convening. The other quote says this: "There's a special place in hell for women who don't help other women." And I know that we'll all be seeing every one of you in heaven. So thank you for allowing me to be with you today, and I'm sending it back to Kayla.
Thank you so much, Nancy and Kathy and Sandy, for sharing your wisdom with us. Before we begin the Q&A, we wanted to ensure that you all had our contact information. And if you have any general questions about AVID, you can always reach us at avidcare@avid.org. And now I think we can go on to our first question. And this actually came from one of our male webinar registrants. He said, "How can I be cognizant of my privilege as a male to help grow women leaders?" Sandy, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Well, first of all, I think it's very cool that this person is asking this. Thank you so much. Just tuning in and then letting us know that you care is a huge motivator. And secondly, I would say that establishing yourself as somebody who's interested in supporting people in their leadership path, sharing that you bring a different perspective to the table that can be of value to females. I think some pretty basic things that you would offer would be very much appreciated and received well by women in leadership roles.
Kathy or Nancy, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, this is Kathy. I'd love to respond to that because as I've been going around the country talking about the research of the 16 competencies, it has just amazed me on how many men come up to me and they'll say to me, not only do I have, women who work with me, I work with women, I have daughters, I have sisters, I have a mother. This is so interesting to me. So I think that especially young men, I find they're not afraid to come up. I've had many young men come up and ask if I would be a mentor to them, which I just love that, because when I was younger, I was asking, older men if they would be, a mentor to me as well as women. So I think it's good. I think men have a feeling that they can learn those, what they used to call soft skills. I don't like that word. I like 21st century skills. But those words of, those things like teamwork and collaboration and critical thinking. I think men are really, really attuned to that. And I think if mentoring, again, women can learn from men, men can learn from women, and we need diverse teams. There's no doubt about it. Teams that have diversity, minorities as well as men and women on them are the much better, stronger teams, and age too. So I hope that answered your question.
Thanks, Kathy. Our next question is, how can we empower our female students to be leaders and ensure our male students are listening? Nancy, why don't we start with you for this question?
Absolutely. I think that part of what we communicate by action. We communicate by how we perceive and express the perception and how we treat each other. We want our females to be confident and to be competent at the same time, and we need to make sure that we are pointing out those skills and strengths, those 21st century skills that the individual has, that benefit the greater system. So I think that if we really point out the strengths and the qualities and characteristics that make an individual a leader, we can start looking at focusing more on who has those characteristics and qualities rather than being just female or male.
Kathy or Sandy, do you have anything to add?
I think this would be a really fun question to turn over to some of our students. And as I was listening to Nancy's answer, I was thinking about the Socratic method of debate that we teach kids in AVID. And it would be really fun to have them take the position of, you could have a male take the position of a female student who is being denied access to leadership, and then you could have them flip-flop and see what creative things they came up with in terms of what they think they need. In fact, I'd really like to have that conversation.
Great.
I'd like to jump on that. One of the questions in the chat, and I guess we're going to go to some of those questions, but one of the questions in the chat that I saw said, how do you build relationships with leaders? And I think I talked a little bit about that, is don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to ask a leader if they would be a mentor or if they could give you advice. I think you'd be surprised how many people are really happy to do that. When I wrote the book, Real Women, Real Leaders, I asked, the foreword was written by my former CEO, Marjorie Scardino. And, she was always in the top 3 of the Fortune 500 CEOs. And people would say to me, how did you get her to write that foreword? And I said, I asked her. Mm-hmm. And she was thrilled. So I think so many times as you're trying to build relationships and learn from other leaders, people just get nervous about asking.
Thank you so much for that, Kathy. That was great. We did have another question come in the chat. Sandy, I'll address this one to you. Do you believe that the landscape is changing for aspiring women superintendents? And if so, where do you see the greatest shift?
The reason I wanted to grab that one, it kind of fit nicely with the last one we just answered. And it goes back to what Kathy and Nancy and I all 3 have said. You would be very, very surprised, maybe just happy to realize that you just pick the phone up and call one, and say, you're a female in the superintendency and I'm looking to be one, and I wondered if I could come in and have 20 or 30 minutes of your time. If you can get past the gatekeeper, I can pretty much guarantee you that you're going to get what you asked for in terms of some advice. And the questions that I would ask is, what do you think helped you get this position? What did you need to know when you were in the queue for trying to get the position, and what do you wish somebody else would have told you? One of the things I always enjoy having conversation with anybody, but particularly females or minorities when they want to get into a leadership position, is just telling them what it's like going through the interviewing process. And honestly, and I know I can say this because I've had the job, but it probably doesn't feel like it if you're trying to get your first one. It's a little bit like dating. You've got to go out and meet the school board and the recruiter and get to know the community to see if that's a good fit for you. And to do that, you've got to put your name out there in a whole lot of places. Otherwise, you don't know whether or not there's a community that might be a better fit. But the first thing that I would say is to get your name out there, let people know that's what you want to do, and start making some cold calls, and I'll bet you people will agree to meet with you.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Sandy. And another interesting phenomena is years ago, I was offered a job with a company I didn't take. And I said to the recruiter, I just don't think I'm ready. Maybe call me back in a couple of years. And my friends and people in leadership positions were horrified that I said that. They're like, Kathy, somebody else is going to take that job. Some guy's going to come in and take that job, and you're going to say, how did he get that job? Because you have to believe in yourself and you have to have confidence. And I think that's a really big part of it, too. And I think if you have confidence, you're willing to share whatever has made you successful with anybody else, no matter if it's a man or a woman, a minority, it's a young person. I think it's something that you just get comfortable in your own skin, and you think, if you want to talk to me, I'm ready. I'm here for you.
So, Kathy, I have to tell this quick story. For the first superintendency, the recruiter called me and said, somebody put your name in as a possible candidate, and I have no idea why. And that was really motivating. And so as a response, I called some people, men and women, who'd been superintendents that I admired, and I said, do you think I'm ready? And they basically said, if you think you're ready, you're ready. And so I thought, okay. And that was just that little bit of motivation and encouragement, which I did not get from the recruiter. And I got in the queue, and I got the job. And I probably would have never thrown my name in if I hadn't had those conversations about, you know, do you think I'm ready, and had some encouragement.
Yep.
Awesome. The next question I wanted to get to was submitted before the webinar, and I want all three of you to answer it. Nancy, we'll start with you. What is your greatest challenge as a powerful woman leader?
Well, you know, I'm going to tell you a couple of little vignettes so that you could maybe see and feel the challenges. First of all, when people have seen me, I was a school principal. I was about to open a brand new $15 million building, and I pulled up my sleeves, and we had all of the textbooks delivered at one time. So we were, you know, I was helping the staff. We were putting, you know, our power together, our muscles together, and putting everything up. Well, the front doorbell rings because this is summertime, and I go to the door, and I answer it, and there's a tall, nice-looking gentleman dressed in a suit, and he steps around me, and he says, I'm here to see the principal. And he walks to the office. And so I let him go on to the office, and I proceeded to help my staff. And then when I got a call in the room asking me to go and meet with this individual, I finished what I was doing, and I went in the back way. And then I asked the secretary to send him in, and I said, hello, I'm the principal. So sometimes when people see you, and I've got to be honest with you, sometimes people of color, if we're not dressed a certain way, people think that we're not as intelligent or prepared or capable. But we are. We have to believe that in ourselves, and we have to understand that it's not your issue, it's the other individual's issue. The second one is kind of funny, the second vignette. I went to an interview, and because I'm married, I have a last name that does not sound Latino. So I think that might have been why I did get an interview, because of my resume and because of my not having a Latino last name. When they saw me, I think they were thrown aback. We proceeded through the whole interview, and the gentleman stands up at the end of the interview and says to me, "My, you speak really well." And so it's the perception and the belief that other people have in you, that you cannot allow that to control and take over, you know, your energy. You need to remain focused and let those things go and learn from those situations, and then also never treat other people that way in return. So really the perception of how I was perceived, either the way I looked, the way I sounded, was a pretty big challenge. And I know that that is a challenge for many other women of color, because less than 1% of women of color are superintendents, and sometimes it's hard to get your foot in the door. But reaching out to people like Sandy and reaching out to people like Kathy and other people in your network will help you find the balance and really continue believing yourself, and then to really be prepared and build your own capacities so that when you're there, you know what you're talking about and people take you seriously. I guess that's what I have, you know, as far as my experience in that.
Thank you so much, Nancy, for sharing those stories. Kathy, would you like to respond to the question next about what your greatest challenge is as a powerful woman leader?
Sure. I'd like to respond to what Nancy said, because that happens a lot in the industry, the educational publishing industry. And I've observed it so often when I've been on panels where there'll be a woman in the room who is the actual CEO of the company. And the people start talking to the man that's in the room. And I've talked to people afterwards. I'll say, you have to let these people know you're the CEO, whether you're 32 years old or you're 40 years old. You are the CEO. So I think that is people have perceptions in their mind, what the CEO is going to look like or what the principal is going to look like or the superintendent. But I think a challenge is don't be intimidated by smart people. There's a lot of smart people in this world. And they can really help you and make your job easier and really make you look good. And you can learn so much from especially younger people, very savvy. And I think you have to have humor and humility. I don't think that's been a challenge for me. I've always had humor. It's, you know, some things happen. Again, it goes back to that drama in the workplace. If somebody slights you, it's just, you know, laugh it off, you know. There are more important things to worry about. So I think the humor and humility thing is important. And that whole thing I talked about, listening, is a challenge sometimes is you want to be the biggest idea person in the room. If your boss is sitting in the room, you want them to, you know, think you look smart. It's just keep your mouth shut, listen to what's going on, and then come up with your opinion. And I mean, over the years, you know, I like to be, you know, have good ideas and in front of people, but I really learned, listen to what's going on in the room and then make your decision and then talk. And I think you get a lot more out of it.
So I want to spin off of that on something that Nancy said too. Here's the positive side. Recruiters and boards are really, really looking for diversity. Even if they don't end up hiring it, they always want it on the slate. So when you are a minority and you are a female, you are going to get more interview slates. Now, again, whether you get the position or not. So you could view that as just kind of good news. When I was leaving Colorado, I knew I wanted to be a superintendent in another state, and I probably put out about, I don't know, anywhere close to 8 to 10 applications that year, and almost all of them I got on the slate, assuming I had the qualifications, the basic qualifications. My biggest challenge as a powerful woman leader, I'm a strong believer that your strengths are your weaknesses. And my strength is that I am not afraid of conflict. I like going really fast, and I like working with things that are very challenging. So the weakness of that is that it can scare people. It doesn't fit the image of what they expected to see if they have a traditional image that a woman should be nurturing and a little softer and maybe not quite so quick or so assertive. So what I've learned I have to do is to figure out how to balance that. What stories do I tell? What relationships do I build? All of us have mentioned building relationships, but let me give you a specific example. When I was in the Denver Area Superintendents Council, it was me and 2 other females, and all of the rest of the superintendents were men. Pretty typical kind of a dynamic. If there was a really big issue that I wanted to discuss and was trying to persuade somebody to do, I didn't just build a relationship, I asked them for their help. So I might go to a superintendent who had been in the systems longer, had more power and voice in the room, and just say, will you help me? This is what I'm worried about. And 9 times out of 10, they would. And so I might open the topic up, and what they would do is choose to use their voice to support whatever it was I was trying to get. In this particular example, we had a commissioner who was trying to stop giving testing of reading to kids in Spanish, even though that was the only language they spoke when they were in elementary school. And so I approached a superintendent who had very, very few Spanish-speaking kids and said, will you help? He said, absolutely, and that's exactly what he did. But I really think your strength is your weakness, and you have to figure out how do you shore up your strength when it's been a weakness, and how do you use it to your advantage when you're needing to use it as a strength.
It's a really powerful message.
That's a very, very good point. You know, I'm just reading another one of the chat things that was saying that what are some recommendations for women leaders of color and under 40, and they felt like it was 3 strikes against them, being a woman leader, being under 40, and a woman of color. I think those are 3 great strikes. And I would say nobody's going to pick you for being a woman leader. No one's going to pick you for being under 40 or a woman of color. But if you go back to those attributes, if you have those other skills of being a team player and being a good communicator, that's what people are looking for in jobs. And I think the days of just checking off boxes are kind of going away. I think people are starting to think that diversity is not about checking off a box. It's about having different kinds of thinkers, people of different religions, people of different political backgrounds, people of different age groups, different minorities. It's not just that check off the box. So I think things are changing. I'm feeling good about that.
Thanks, Kathy. We have time for one more question, and Nancy, since you've got such a strong resume of leadership positions, we'd like you to take this question. What other leadership opportunities are there for women in education besides becoming a superintendent?
Well, it's the gamut. Whatever roles we see in the education setting are opportunities to lead. Everything from, you know what, a teacher is a leader. They can be teacher leaders. There are everything from, you know, principal through central office, through specialized areas. There's so much need in certain areas, like being a bilingual school psychologist, like being a nurse. There are so many roles, but my recommendation is you need to find that role that fits your capacities and your characteristics and your beliefs. It is really important for you to realize that when we're looking at ourselves as a leader, we need to make sure that we're writing our own narrative. Who are we? What do we do? What are we good at? What are our strengths? What are the weaknesses? Where are we going to build capacity? So we do need to write our own narrative based on where we want to be, where we want to end up as a leader. So there's everything from a consultant to a school leader and everything outside. You heard Kathy talk about, you know, outside of the school setting. There are, you know, many companies, organizations, consulting firms. So sometimes you have to find your niche and where your confidence lies and when your capacities will benefit the greater organization. So my recommendation is You need to write your own narrative. And we, honestly, the ladies right now, we are the modern day female warriors. We need to write our own narrative. We need to build our own Wakanda.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there are jobs, Nancy, outside of education. I mean, I do think what you mentioned, teacher leaders, that's a very important job. I'm on the Center for Teacher Quality Board, and I've learned more about how important it is to be a teacher leader. So I think those are very important things. But there's so many great nonprofits that are out there. This whole social entrepreneurship is just a great calling for people to be part of these nonprofits and then to work with companies. There's so many new companies, and everyone's looking for people who have education expertise. So again, I think go out and talk to people. If you're at meetings, go up and ask people how they got their jobs. And I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity out there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sandy and Kathy and Nancy, and thank you everyone out there for joining us today. It's such an important discussion, and we want to keep it going. I know a lot of questions got submitted that we didn't get to just yet, but we're going to share that with our panelists and try to put together a little question and answer document for you when we send out the recording and slide deck, as well as other resources later on this week. So again, thank you all so much for joining us for this really important conversation. Have a great week and keep going. Whatever you're doing, keep going and become the leader you're meant to be. Thanks so much.
Thank you.